In 1942, a woman named Grace Wilson tried to get a job in Kansas. She wanted to build aircraft for the war effort. They turned her away at the door, not for lack of skill, not for lack of experience. She could not produce a birth certificate. Grace wrote to the government. Her words still sit in the record. It is a bitter hurt feeling to know you are an American citizen whose grandparents as well as parents also were, and still not be able to establish citizenship. Grace Wilson was born in America. She had lived there her entire life. But in the eyes of the system, she did not officially exist. She was not alone. By 1941, the federal government had made a quiet and staggering discovery. 60 million native-born Americans, roughly a third of the working population, had no documentary proof of their birth. Not because they had not been born, because nobody had written it down. Between 1940 and 1945, 43 million people flooded state offices requesting certified birth certificates. The demand was so overwhelming that by the end of 1942, the War Manpower Commission declared what officials called a national birth certificate crisis. Their solution was astonishing. Workers could simply swear to their own citizenship in front of a military representative. An oath. The penalty for lying was $10,000 and 5 years in prison. But the penalty for having no record was losing your livelihood. 43 million Americans lined up to prove something their communities had known since the day they were born. That number should trouble you, because it raises a question nobody seems to ask. How did the most documented civilization in history manage to lose track of a third of its own people? The answer is simpler and stranger than you might expect. For most of human history, no government on earth required a birth certificate, not one. The Roman Empire tracked households for taxation and military conscription. Medieval Europe relied on parish baptism records kept by clergy. The Ottoman Empire used community registries tied to religious affiliation. These systems had flaws. They excluded people. They were manipulated by local authorities. But they operated on a fundamentally different principle. Your existence was confirmed through relationship. The community knew you, the church recognized you, your family vouched for you. Identity was something you carried in the memory of the people around you, not in a numbered document held by a distant institution. You did not need a certificate to prove you had been born. The fact that you were standing there was sufficient. Then, in roughly 30 years, the entire system changed. In the United States, the shift began in 1902 when the Census Bureau became a permanent federal agency and started building standardized birth registration areas. By 1907, the federal government had produced its first standard birth certificate form. By 1915, a national birth registration area existed, though only 10 states and the District of Columbia were initially compliant. By 1933, every single state had joined. 31 years. That is all it took for the country to restructure how it accounted for every human being born within its borders. And this was not just America. England and Wales had started civil registration in 1837, though enforcement remained weak until fines were imposed in 1874. France, Germany, Australia, Canada. Different governments, different languages, different legal traditions, all arriving at the same administrative architecture within the same compressed historical window. As if they were all reading from blueprints none of them had written. Now consider what else was built during those 31 years. The Federal Reserve was created in 1913. The federal income tax was ratified through the 16th Amendment the same year. Social Security arrived in 1935. The World War I draft required documented proof of age and citizenship in 1917. Every one of these systems needed the birth certificate as its foundation. You cannot tax an individual without first identifying them. You cannot conscript someone without verifying their age. You cannot distribute benefits without a registered entry point. The birth certificate was not a gift to the citizen. It was the root credential, the first entry in a ledger that would follow a human life from its opening breath to its final record. The standard explanation for all of this is public health. And in fairness, that explanation is not empty. Progressive-era reformers wanted to track infant mortality, understand disease patterns, and improve maternal care. Historian Susan Pearson has argued persuasively that the birth certificate rose because of child labor campaigns. Reformers needed age to be a verifiable legal fact, not something a parent could simply claim. These were real problems. These were real solutions. I want to acknowledge that clearly. But the public health rationale does not explain the scope of what followed. It does not explain why a document created for infant mortality statistics became the single credential upon which every other legal identity depends. It does not explain the speed. It does not explain the global coordination. And it does not explain what happened to everything that came before. This is where it becomes personal. If you have ever tried to trace your family tree, you already know what I am about to describe. You go back through the records, you find your grandparents, maybe your great-grandparents, and then, somewhere around the late 1800s, the names stop. The trail goes cold. Genealogists have a term for this. They call it the brick wall. And it is not random. It clusters at the same historical moment, across every ethnicity and every region, for reasons that are structural, not accidental. Start with the 1870 census. This was the first federal enumeration to list formerly enslaved people by name. Before 1870, more than 4 million human beings appeared on government records only as tick marks on slave schedules. Age, sex, and monetary value. No names, no family connections, no identity. The 1870 census was supposed to be the beginning of their documentary existence, but for millions of African American families, it became the wall. Everything before it is genealogical darkness. Not because those people did not have names and families and histories, because the system that recorded them did not consider them worth documenting as individuals. Now move forward 20 years. The 1890 census. This was the most detailed population count in American history up to that point. 63 million people enumerated. First census to ask about immigration status. First to record naturalization. First to document Civil War service. And the first census for which the government did not require backup copies filed at local offices. When it was finished, there was exactly one copy. On January 10, 1921, a fire broke out in the basement of the Commerce Building in Washington. The earlier censuses from 1830 through 1910 sat inside a fireproof vault. The 1890 census was stacked outside the vault in the open basement. It was, according to one federal report, first in the path of the firemen. 25% of the records were destroyed immediately. Half of what survived was soaked with water and left to mildew. The government debated what to do. For 12 years they debated, and then in 1933 Congress authorized the destruction of the remaining fragments. The authorization came the day before workers laid the cornerstone for the new National Archives building. Out of 63 million names, 6,160 survive. That is not a rounding error. That is an erasure. A 20-year hole in the American record during the single most transformative period of immigration, industrialization, and westward migration. Your great-grandparents may have been among those 63 million names. You will never know. The void extends further. Between the late 1800s and early 1900s, half to three-quarters of all births in the United States went completely unregistered. Virginia recorded no births at all between 1896 and 1912. 16 years. No records. Most southern states did not achieve reliable vital record keeping until the 1940s. If your ancestors were born in rural America before the turn of the century, the odds are good that no government document marks their arrival into the world. They existed in the space between the old system and the new one, and that space left no paper trail. And then there are the names. Everyone has heard the story. Your ancestor arrived at Ellis Island and a clerk changed the family surname because he could not spell it. It is one of the most widely believed stories in American genealogy. It is also completely false. The Smithsonian, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, and virtually every professional genealogist has confirmed this. Ellis Island inspectors did not write down immigrant names. Names were recorded on ship manifests in Europe before the voyage even began. A third of Ellis Island inspectors were immigrants themselves, speaking an average of 3 languages. They were checking names against a list, not inventing new ones. So where did the name changes actually happen? The answer is quieter and more consequential. Immigrants changed their own names, voluntarily, often years after arrival. Many did it during the naturalization process, where a court petition could officially replace one identity with another. Schmidt became Smith. Giovanni became John. This was not forced. It was strategic, driven by the pressure to assimilate, to find work, to avoid discrimination. But here is the part that nobody talks about. When that immigrant registered the birth of their American-born child, the new name went on the certificate, not the old one. The birth certificate locked the Americanized identity into the official record and severed the documentary link to the old world. The connection was not stolen by a careless clerk. It was surrendered at a government counter, one generation at a time. The document that was supposed to anchor heritage became the instrument that cut it loose. I need to stop here and be honest about something. I spent 3 days with this research before writing a single word. Not because the evidence was thin, because I kept arguing with myself about what it meant. The public health explanation is real. Birth registration saved lives. Tracking infant mortality led to interventions that reduced childhood death on a massive scale. I am not dismissing that. But I cannot reconcile the stated purpose with the full architecture of what was built. A document designed to count dead infants does not need to become the sole gateway to employment, banking, education, military service, and legal existence. That expansion happened without public debate. It happened without philosophical reckoning. And it happened so completely that most people alive today cannot imagine any other way of proving they exist. That silence is what keeps me writing. Pull the pieces together, and a shape forms that the official narrative cannot account for. 1870, first census to name formerly enslaved people. Everything before, gone. 1890, most detailed census in history, the one that bridged the old world and the new. Stored outside the vault, burned. Survivors destroyed 12 years later, 1896 to 1912. Virginia records no births. Other states similarly dark, 1902 to 1933. New registration system captures everyone going forward, nothing going backward. 1936. Social Security numbers issued for the first time. The original cards were printed with a warning on the face that read, "Not for identification." Within a generation, that number became the closest thing America has to a national identity code. And before 1972, you could obtain one without showing a single piece of identification. No proof of who you were, just a name you gave and a number you received. The system did not verify your past, it assigned your future. In 1986, the Tax Reform Act required Social Security numbers for every dependent over the age of 5 claimed on a tax return. That single change caused 7 million previously claimed dependents to vanish from the tax rolls overnight. 7 million children who had existed on paper, who had reduced someone's tax burden, who had been carried through the system as real, turned out to be phantoms. The system had been running for 50 years without checking. By 1990, the requirement extended to every child from birth. Today, your Social Security number is requested at the hospital, printed alongside your mother's name, and filed before you leave the building. You are numbered before you are named. What if the real question is not why the system was built, but what it replaced? Before registration, your identity lived in the memory of your community. The parish knew you. The village elder remembered your parents. Your grandmother carried the family story. None of that translates into a government ledger. And once the ledger became the only accepted proof of existence, everything that could not be entered into it became, officially, unverifiable. Not erased exactly, just rendered invisible to any institution that matters. The oral tradition that connected you to 6 generations back. The parish record in a language no clerk at the county office could read. The family name your grandfather carried across an ocean and quietly retired at a naturalization hearing. All of it sits outside the system. All of it is, in the language of modern bureaucracy, insufficient documentation. So here is where I leave you, with the questions that will not resolve. Why was the 1890 census the single record that connected the pre-registration world to the post-registration world, the one record stored outside the fireproof vault? Why did Congress authorize its destruction on the eve of building an archive specifically designed to prevent such losses? Why did every industrialized nation construct the same identity architecture within the same 30-year window? Why does every genealogist, regardless of ethnicity or region, hit the same wall at roughly the same historical moment? And why, when you hold your own birth certificate, does it tell you nothing about the people who came before you? The document proves you are real to every institution that governs your life, but it carries no memory. You were entered into this system before you could speak, before you could consent, before you understood what it meant to be counted. The document was not written for you, it was written about you, and everything it cannot contain, every name it does not carry, every connection it did not preserve, that is the inheritance it quietly erased. Your family tree does not end where the records stop. It ends where the recording began.